everything you know about MotoGP, everything you love, and everything you hold dear has now been ruined at the hands of Freddie Spencer. Apparently. Welcome back to Motorsport 101.
He got America involved in this sport, and gosh darn it, America doesn't deserve anything nice.
Clearly not.
You're not wrong.
I mean,
we could see it. I mean, it's better if we say it because we're not like coming at it from like a condescending perspective on it. But I don't know. Sorry, I just had to get that out there.
No, it's entirely fair.
We can't let Dad talk about it over there in the London corner.
Of course. Oh, by the way, welcome to episode 438 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. And as you may have guessed by the creative intro and RJ having to get that America off his chest in regards to Freddie Spencer, we are talking about MotoGP Spanish Grand Prix. It's weird how we have 4 races in Spain, but only this one is specifically called the Spanish Grand Prix. But here we are. Yeah, it's the Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez, one of the traditional big rounds on the calendar. 80,000 in the house. This time around as well.
Yeah.
So great turnout for this one. A lot of excitement, a lot of hype in the air, and after it all, Francesco Bagnaia wins. Lol.
He stayed on the bike this time.
He did stay on the bike this time. Good for him. And he won too. You know, got a narrow W over
Winner
our
DNF
friend
continues.
Over our friend and yours, the Lord, Brad Binder. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about KTM. If only Ryan King was here to listen to this, he'd be so happy right now that he had 4 KTMs on the podium over the course of the weekend. 4 of them.
I just know Ryan Eric King is looking down from Gizmondo heaven and smiling upon all of us.
That is very bold to assume that Gizmondo went to heaven.
Indeed, but
Gizmodo, not Gizmondo.
Yeah, you said Gizmondo, and I rolled with it.
Indeed.
Neither went to heaven.
As you can probably tell by now, joining me is RJ O'Connell. Hello, RJ.
Hi, everyone. If you're listening to this, I'm probably getting back from the Miami Grand Prix. I've either had a really wonderful time, a really strange time, a really hectic time, or just a miserable time. It could be any one of them. I'd like to think it was a good time. But you'll hear more about it once we get into our Miami Grand Prix episode when we talk about 4 wheels. But I watched more of this race than I did Baku, and I gotta say, great decision for me. It's just strange that I just barely remember most of it.
Yeah, it's a weird one in the sense that Jerez was, I think, actually a pretty good race. I'd maybe go as far as to say the best MotoGP race you've had so far this season.
I don't think that's a very high bar to clear, and I do think this race did indeed clear it.
Yeah. I mean, okay, the rest of the year has been pretty mid, and the fun talk has been the sprints, and it was another good sprint. But I think the Grand Prix was also pretty good too. And yeah, Cam Buckley, what did you make of the weekend in general?
It was a pretty fun race. I mean, this track that used to be, I mean, this track basically invented the modern stewarding decision system of MotoGP, and yet here we are, almost 20 years later, back at it again. I'm so sick of talking about motorsport officiating.
It's just, it never stops getting dull and duller, unfortunately, because it's just so infuriating that we have to keep doing this again and again and again. And I'll get into my chaos.
I mean, what are we going to talk about? Marc Marquez was hurt again. Enea Bastianini was hurt again. Miguel Oliveira got hurt.
Again. Yeah.
Oh,
and, I mean, Honda came crashing back down to earth with,
a flood.
Half their bikes. Half their bikes out of the race, including the first one being Alex Rins.
The man who won 2 weeks prior. Yeah.
But it could be worse. You could be Yamaha. Dear God.
At least Frankie's looking a bit better, I suppose, relative to his teammate, I guess.
Where is this bar?
I don't know, but I want him to clear it because I want good things for Franco Morbidelli.
Me too.
Dre, tell fine people, our podcast readers, where they can find us.
Yes, you can find us on our website, motorsport101.com. Dre's race review for this race was the longest MotoGP episode of Dre's Race Review I have ever written.
That bitch took me like 15 minutes to read through, and I am a fast reader.
Yeah, like the read time on it is 11 minutes. And,
I was having to go back and reanalyze parts of it.
Yeah, it was a lot because I had so much to say in regards to this. Not only the stewarding, but the very culture of how we got to this point, and me basically pretending to be John Bercow as Speaker of the House of Commons. You'd have to read the post to get the perspective I'm talking about here. But me just sitting there thinking, order, regarding MotoGP stewarding in general. There's a big deep dive on that. One of the other topics we're going to be getting into briefly in a minute about the Women's World Championship that was also announced over this weekend. And yeah, like KTM as well being really good, because we'll talk a little bit about that, and a certain other rider that made a wildcard appearance, number 26. You'll know who I'm talking about in a minute. But we'll get into some of that. Like I said, website motorsport101.com. There's also some thoughts on there for IndyCar at Barber, as well as Formula One in Baku. Well, everything else besides Formula One at Baku, to be honest with you. And of course, if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon. Patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of our episodes. 10 gets you in the supporters club of our Discord server, where you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, like Zoe is right now. Hi, Zoe. Thanks for listening in. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter at motorsport_101. Our personal handles at Dre_WTF1, at RJ O'Connell, and at C Buckley 917. Do check us out where you can. Right, let's get into MotoGP's Spanish Grand Prix.
The first of many Spanish Grand Prix, but this is the only Spanish Grand Prix, capital S Spanish Grand Prix, at Jerez, was a tense battle that went down to the wire as Francesco Bagnaia, your reigning world champion, narrowly beat Brad Binder over the line by half a second in what would be KTM's best ever MotoGP weekend of the season thus far. A sprint win for Binder and 2 bikes on the podium in both the sprint and the Grand Prix, with Jack Miller's pair of third places. And Dani Pedrosa, the greatest rider never to win a Premier Class world title, but not for lack of trying, came back as KTM's wild card. He finished 6th in the sprint. He backed that up with 7th in the Grand Prix too. There were standing ovations and a huge party in the back as Pedrosa got the Dale Earnhardt finally wins the Daytona 500 pit lane treatment. So, Dre, is KTM real?
I'm just chop liver on this podcast now. I see how it is.
This is an interesting one, because I'm kind of in two minds on this one, right? Because one side of me is like, KTM has always had the upside to be this good.
The flashes
of it. It doesn't happen often. Like when it rains, they're often really, really good, as Miguel Oliveira proved. When they get the setup right, again, like Miggy did a few times over, they can be really, really good. Good enough to win outright. No questions asked. They've had a couple of freaky wins, like Brad Binder's comeback in the flag-to-flag race, for example, is another one where you go, well, my God, what the hell did I just witness? But first and foremost, I want to compliment the riders, because they all stepped up big this weekend. Brad Binder was sensational all week. Probably his best weekend in MotoGP as a rider. He looked like he belonged. In race trim, he was sensational all weekend long. It was the weekend for me that Binder showed he can be a truly elite rider in this class one day. Get him a competitive bike, and this man is going to fly. He's an incredible late breaker. He can drift that KTM like nobody's business around some of these corners. And he gave Francesco Bagnaia, the reigning world champion on the best bike in this sport, every bit of business he could. They were virtually inseparable for most of that race.
That was such a great chase between Bagnaia and Binder. So
yeah,
good.
Bagnaia was over the line with
the old college try.
Yeah, like this was the true definition of the loss of the late breakers between these two. And Bagnaia passed Binder at the Lorenzo final corner hairpin with 3 laps to go. Bagnaia goes over the line with a half-second lead, and you're thinking, well, Bagnaia, knowing how good a front runner he is, if he doesn't tuck the front, he's got this in the bag. No, Binder gunned him down on the final lap, and he claims, and we'll get into more of this, he claims that Freddie Spencer's words of doubt in his ears is what stopped him from sending it on Bagnaia on the final corner. The traditional, we've seen it many a time, the final corner lunge at Jerez. I think he's talking out of his butt because I remember him talking about it in the post-race drivers' room. Where riders, I should say. But where he said that if he sent it, he would have wiped them both out. Is what he's by his own admission.
Yeah, he would have had to. He would have had to brake so late, and with how critical these front tires are, and Michelin once again getting raked over the coals this weekend by some of the riders.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it would have been an extremely low percentage move, and for once, it would have actually been the other guy not taking the points that would have ruined Bagnaia's day.
Yeah, that one you wouldn't have been able to hold that one against him. But Binder made a business decision, took the 20 points, and took 32 on the weekend.
He could have got there in the end.
Yeah, and look, Brad Binder is now 3rd in the championship after all of this.
Yeah,
him and Bezzecchi are the only 2 guys within a Grand Prix level worth of points behind Bagnaia in the title race, because Bez left this weekend with 0.
Disastrous weekend. When the best thing about your weekend is that it started with a catastrophic engine failure, you're probably not having a good time.
Yeah, and I love that the journos knew, they had the documents about how old that engine was, and they
how old was it?
Start of the season old.
Man, that's old. That's so old. It remembers when the Sony PlayStation was the hottest thing in video games. Am I right? Thank you. Try the Veal. It's the best in town.
Stop it.
The PlayStation. The PlayStation 5 is still doing very well for itself, RJ. Regarding KTM, I don't know. But I don't know.
We've been here before.
We have seen this way too many times where KTM rolls up. They have a great weekend. All of their bikes are fighting. And then next week they're fighting for fringe points.
Yeah.
And I think there's been less of that this year. I think they are beginning to get a handle on things. And the latest shipment of crack was actually diverted from Aprilia into KTM's aero department by virtue of Red Bull Racing. The world's most lovable racing team.
Big triangle rear spoiler on the back of that.
No, not that. They have a whole. They were testing in Jerez after this where the much hallowed Honda Calyx frame appeared, and as it turns out, everyone likes it.
Good.
Everyone likes it until Stefan Brattle put it on the floor in the first test.
Oh
yeah, well,
Stefan.
I digress. KTM had this giant horizontal flap ahead of their ground effect fairing, so they're starting to they're treading into proper ground effect tunnel territory with their fairings. It's really quite wild. But yeah, I need to see more out of KTM sustained on this level.
Because, on the one hand, Jack Miller had a great weekend with a pair of podiums. The week before, he crashed 6 times in a Grand Prix weekend.
Yes, and Jack Miller's body is still a machine that turns fresh tires into destroyed tires.
Yes. But God bless him, he was at least competitive for this one.
Yeah, very competitively quick around this track, but this is just one track. And they were competitively quick in Coda and then had a disastrous end to the weekend.
What does it say about the state of the field that a man who's only had one other MotoGP appearance since his retirement in Valencia 2018 can come back into MotoGP dry and then immediately be competitive? Because Dani Pedrosa was 1.8 seconds off the win in the sprint and only 6 seconds off the win in the actual Grand Prix. Dani Pedrosa is still that dude.
That's what happens when you open up the crate and there's still an alien inside. And he is still just one of the most extraordinary riders I've ever seen. He's just so goddamn good.
Special. He's such a special talent. I mean, let's not forget, we are talking about a 5'2" man who is 100 pounds soaking wet, and he is riding a 320 horsepower bike, one that's generally still quite unfamiliar to him. And he hasn't ridden a proper Grand Prix. He's only done it once in the last 5 years. 7th.
And he beat the brakes off of 2/3 of this field.
He is remarkable. What a talent, Dani Pedrosa. You forget how good you forget that.
The only reason why we forget is because he was up against Casey Stoner and Marc Marquez on the same equipment, fighting Valentino Rossi and Jorge Lorenzo for wins. That's a hell of a class.
He was the 5th man with 4 of quite possibly the 10 greatest bike riders to ever walk this earth.
I had removed possibly from that sentence. I mean,
I was lowballing it only because of Casey, only because his career was cut short. But anyone who knows Casey knows he was a freak.
Raw talent like nothing you've ever seen. And Dani Pedrosa, I mean, moment of the weekend for me, going P1 in practice.
Oh yeah.
And then Alberto Puig, the guy who who discovered him and sacrificed Nicky Hayden's career at Honda to favor Pedrosa, then threw Pedrosa out on the street into an early retirement.
To bring in Lorenzo.
That went real well.
His nemesis,
who then proceeded to have his career ended by that shitbox of a bike. They cut directly to his face.
Beautiful. Mwah.
Get that TV director a raise.
That was genius. That was. I loved every minute of that shit. Whoever was TV director on that one, write them a check. That was art right there. Oh god. And I wrote about this. This felt like the true coming out party for Dani Pedrosa that he probably should have gotten 5 years ago.
He was very unceremoniously dropped.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people in MotoGP knew it, that he still had something to give. Honda has never recovered from their departure. He is still badly missed in that Honda garage. And this felt like a proper coming out party. I know MotoGP now does the rider parade with the open top bus before every race now. They brought that in this year. Very cleverly. Like, Jack Miller could tell that they were only here for one man, especially now Marc Marquez announced on Wednesday that he wasn't going to race this weekend. And he literally got off the bus and lifted Dani Pedrosa up in front of the crowd like the Lion
crowd
King.
Erupted.
Oh, they loved every minute. Like, they were going nuts for Dani Pedrosa.
And he's not a hard man to pick up.
No, like I said, 5'2", 100 pounds soaking wet, like a 10-year-old kid.
And a warrior. This dude reminds me of, you remember, for wrestling fans, you remember when WWE would have those promotions like telling kids not to replicate the shit they do at home.
Don't try to set home or at school.
Yeah, and they would have like all the wrestlers talk about their injuries, and it reminds me of Rey Mysterio Jr., another dude who's like 5'2" and weighs 100 pounds soaking wet, talking about how he had surgery 5 times in his left knee, and that's light work compared to what Dani Pedrosa's got.
Dani Pedrosa is still more titanium than man.
Yes,
we love him.
He has broken pretty much every major extremity limb on his body over the course of his career. He's now 37 years old. He's still, like I said, 5'2", maybe 100 pounds. He could still walk into MotoGP tomorrow and do a job. What a remarkable talent. And the amount of people that came out onto the pit lane when he got back to the garage after the race, lining up for high fives, and he got a standing ovation from his KTM crew when he got back to the garage. 7th place is a remarkable achievement for Pedrosa, given the circumstances. And
how close this field is.
It's nuts. He was 6 seconds off the win cam. 6 seconds. That's nothing.
That was Brad Binder and Francesco Bagnaia going hell for leather at the front of the field. At the absolute bleeding edge.
Some of the fastest dudes we've ever seen in this sport were directly in front of him. Like Jorge Martin, who is, again, we all know, ludicrously fast when he wants to be. Bagnaia, stupid fast when he wants to be. Brad Binder, incredible all-round bike rider. Jack Miller, He's a tire shredder, but he's still damn quick, and he always has been. Like, these are incredible talents we've got around here. I do not get into this notion of, oh, well, the field must suck if Pedrosa's good. No, Pedrosa is just that good, and the field is good. Like, the sport works from a talent development standpoint. Dani Pedrosa is so good. And you know what? I hope he doesn't come back, if for no other reason that this was the perfect send-off. Just a reminder of his class. And KTM, they are so lucky to have him. And they know they're so lucky to have him, and that's why they gave him a hero's welcome. And they were throwing him around the garage like it was Valentino Rossi's retirement from from last year, because there was beers and wine and shit being thrown everywhere, and Dani was getting the Olé chants everywhere. They love him. They love him
like a Sami Zayn coming out for the main event of night one of WrestleMania.
Oh, hell yeah! That's exactly what this is. It's incredible. It's incredible.
God, what a moment! What a special moment! What a great thing to take away from this Jerez weekend. And now let's just throw that all in the garbage and talk about how the sausage is made, as you're fond of saying, because we all know why we're here. Members of the media. We'll not say who. We'll probably mention them later. But members of the media were apocalyptically mad over several of the stewarding decisions in today's race. Both factory Yamahas, that would be, of course, Fabio Quartararo and Franco Morbidelli, had long lap penalties given due to incidents on lap 1 in the sprint and the race. One of those incidents really hurt Miguel Oliveira. Like, he's generally fine. Nothing serious, but he did get messed up pretty bad.
No, it's come out that he has a small fracture in his left humerus.
I don't find that humorous. But
no,
both Quartararo and Morbidelli got long lap penalties. Francesco Bagnaia was given a position drop penalty mid-race for an aggressive move on Jack Miller, while Miller avoided punishment for a similar move on Jorge Martin. Y'all, I'm going to let y'all cook for this one while I ask you the question. Cam, I'm going to start with you. Has Freddie Spencer gone too far?
Oh, God.
Take your time.
I need a deck chair. I need a beer, a strong beer.
Do you need some time to process this along with the news that IMSA just cut LMP3 from the Sports Car Championship?
Huh?
Yeah, that news just broke.
I've never been harder in my entire life.
Sorry,
anyway.
sorry for the derailment. Breaking news on Motorsport 101 recorded Wednesday.
That does my heart. That does my heart good.
Get ready to learn VP Sports Car Racing Championship, buddy.
Get ready to learn the void, buddy. Speaking of the void, screaming into it. No? But also yes? Okay, so the long lap penalties, the Yamaha riders. Let's unpack the incidents. Yes, Zoe, thank you in the chat. Let's unpack these incidents one on one. First of all, Frankie Morbidelli's in the sprint. Sent it up the inside in a disappearing gap that was probably never really there. Caused a big pile up. I thought that long lap penalty was very well earned, especially given the calls for a certain rider to have a race ban and I don't care, ban him mentality around him after that incident in the opening round. Fabio Quartararo's, I've rewatched this. It's turn 2 incident in the first lap of the race. I've rewatched this, God, maybe 20 times. And I just feel, I'm going to take a page out of James Hinchcliffe's book regarding racing 3 wide. If you're the last into a 3 wide, you need to be the first one out of it. And Fabio was in between 2 other bikes without really having any position to try and make an overtake. And the gap just closed while he was still in it. And everyone went down.
Yeah.
Again, given the precedent that was set on the opening lap the previous day, and given a lot of the discourse that we've seen around riding incidents this year, I didn't have a problem with the long lap penalty for that either. And that's where the stewarding discourse kind of begins. Because everyone was up in arms that he got a penalty for that. Dre? I'll only get into the aggressive racing penalties separately because those are, I think, an entirely different discussion.
Now, I'm generally in agreement with Cam on this. I think a lot of that, the first two, you talk about Yamaha and the long lap penalties. My general rule of thumb is, well, how do you feel about lap one incidents in general? Because, like, Jerez is a nasty track, especially off the start, because turns 1 and 2 in Jerez are quite brutal. Turn 1 is an uphill, 90-degree right-hander. You know, a lot of camber involved. It's not an easy corner to get a load of bikes through. A lot of bikes are going to have to square off the corner, just by proxy. Turn 2 is the slowest corner on the track. It's a hairpin bend. It goes downhill into its braking zone, and you're putting 22 320 horsepower bikes through that same funnel. A part of me feels like it's inevitable, but I came up with the theory that I felt like Freddie Spencer boxed himself in with that first decision on Morbidelli. And look, there is an argument you can make that Morbidelli deserves a penalty for that sprint clash. There's also an argument that he doesn't deserve one. I think you could go either way on that one. But I think once Freddie made the call to hit Morbidelli with a long lap penalty, it boxes him in for Quartararo. Because for me, you can't give that as a penalty, but then not penalise Quartararo for his incident, where he basically goes into the middle of a free wide with Marco Bezzecchi and Miguel Oliveira, gets his braking point wrong, goes in too deep, and then collects himself and takes Miggy with him.
Well, he didn't go too deep. He just got hit because he's in the middle of the 3 wide, and he's not really in the 3 wide. He's got about half his front tire in there.
He's half committed, which is about the worst thing.
Exactly. I mean, we talked about this in Formula 1. If you're going to commit to an overtake, commit to it. Don't go for the overtake, end up in that situation, and then try to back out of it when it's too late, because you're just going to cause an incident. It's a low Danny Rick in Mexico against Tsunoda last year. Is like a perfect example.
It's a low percentage move at best.
Yeah.
And you're playing with fire if you're going to go into the middle of a 3 wide like that, especially on that sort of corner. That is asking for trouble. Someone's going to have to sit their bike up. There's no way you're getting 3 bikes through there clean. No. That's asking for trouble. So yeah, I can understand the arguments. And on a side note, Fabio's second long lap during the race was an absolute slam dunk penalty. Anyone getting mad about that is blind. That's always been the rule. If you
for context,
it's a binary rule for a long lap penalty that if you put a wheel outside either line, when you serve in your penalty loop, you will be asked to do it again. And it's a binary rule. It always
how it is in every motorsport in the world. If you don't serve your penalty correctly, you have to serve it again.
Yeah, that's an across-the-board rule. So anyone getting mad about that is crazy. It's always been that way. And it's, to be fair to MotoGP, it's always been enforced correctly as well, as far as I'm aware. So I've not seen an example where someone's crossed the line and not been penalised for it. So whatever. The difficulty comes when we get to the race itself and the 2 incidents involving involving Jack Miller, ironically. Bagnaia passing Miller at Pedrosa corner, and then Miller's on Martin at Lorenzo corner a couple of laps later. Now, to me, I don't think either of these passes warrants a penalty.
I agree.
I think that Bagnaia's move at the hairpin was late. It was aggressive, but I think it was fair. I think Spencer reacted to Jack Miller's angry response. That's my theory. I think he saw Miller raise a hand in frustration and then made the call that Bagnaia must have hit him or something, or seen the replay and thought, well, this is overly aggressive, hit him with a position drop. Which, again, I don't agree with it, but I can see an argument as to why that might be deemed too much. However, by that logic alone, your entire argument falls apart if you don't clap Miller for that block pass at the Lorenzo hairpin on Jorge Martin, who the only reason there wasn't contact was because Martin had to take evasive action.
He jumped out the way.
He had to get out of the way because Miller would have speared him otherwise. Now, again, that was deemed a clean pass and no penalty was given. The first 3 incidents we've mentioned, in a vacuum, if you've thrown out the precedent that if you go over this line of aggressive moves with contact, you're now going to be punished for it, fine. Again, I don't agree with it, but I can understand how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4 throws the first 3 out of the water. That's the problem, because now you've set a confusing precedent and then you've immediately broken it with Miller.
You've thrown out your own precedent.
Right.
1 incident later.
Now, I'm going to be real with you here for a minute. I don't like the way Freddie Spencer is being discussed about this, and there's a reason why for this, right? And this is where my House of Commons analogy comes into play. If anyone's ever seen British Parliament and seen the House of Commons, the party in government takes the right-hand side, and then you've got the opposition parties on the left-hand side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Replace them with, on the right side, the FIM, Freddie Spencer, and Dorna, right? The guys who organise this sport on all levels. There is a level of accountability on their end that they need to be held to account for. I'll give some of the mainstream media this. They're right. I don't like that Freddie Spencer never talks to the media. I don't like that there is no explanation towards any of the decisions that the FIM makes regarding how their races are officiated.
Yeah, like Freddie Spencer in this case, like the FIA has been, well, they did it more or less of their own volition and were then forced to more or less put out documents breaking down the steward's explanation of why a decision was or was not taken. I think in the name of transparency, that's a good move, because even if you don't agree with something, you can see how they got there.
Yeah.
In the case of the FIM, they're more or less a faceless entity. Other than, putting it to a name, each decision is made unilaterally with no discussion on the public side. We're not privy to any justification of why they do or do not do something.
Right.
Nope.
I don't like that. And I don't like the fact that they're never available to explain their decisions to the media, which would go a very long way to trying to at least see the logic and see where they're coming from, even if you disagree with it. I'm not saying...
Everybody has said what they would about Michael Massey about 10, 20, 50 times over, but he always made time for people, including myself, to explain what he did after a race.
Yeah. And I'm very glad, at least, that when Australia came up again earlier this season, and this is a small tangent here for a minute, that some of the things said about Freddie Spencer during this weekend were vile. They were disgusting. And they have no place in a civilized social media platform anywhere. And I distinctly remember during the Australian Grand Prix and for Formula One, because Michael Massey was in the house there, because obviously he's now race director for V8 Supercars. And Ted Kravitz, who has absolutely fanned the flames about Abu Dhabi 2021 multiple times since it's happened. In fact, it was probably his comments that led to the infamous Red Bull media boycott they had during Mexico last year. It's mentioned again that he feels like Hamilton's an 8-time world champion and that he was the true winner of Abu Dhabi 2021. And it was David Croft who had to step in and was like, no, Michael Massey...
Get to that.
Yeah.
Before you even get to that, he was basically saying, why is he in the paddock? Why is he allowed to be here? Why is he allowed to be in the presence of F1? It's like, because he has a job to do.
Yeah. He's literally on the support bill doing his job for V8 Supercars who decided to hire him. That's their right. And
a race that none of us could watch live unless you got a VPN, but that's neither here nor there.
Point is, regardless of whether you agree with someone or not on their decisions, and it affects your favorite boy, he's a human being.
And he did not deserve the vitriol that he got from Kravitz during that broadcast, and I'm glad that David Croft had to be the one to step in and was like, well, no, he's a human being and he's doing his job. And that's why he's here. And as much as you agree or disagree with that decision, he doesn't deserve to be sent death threats regarding his own existence, so has to worry about himself or his family, which is a disgusting thing to have to fear and worry about in today's society. So no. However,
you do not.
Yeah.
A given individual does not deserve death threats because they made a decision that affects your favorite athlete.
100%. And on the one side of that, you've got Freddie Spencer, Dorna, the FIM. On the other end of the coin, we have us, the fans, the mainstream media. And I think we're just as accountable as they are in regards to how this sport should be officiated. Like, some of the extreme comments I've heard regarding how this sport is being seen right now is laughable to me. I heard comments referring to the sport as corrupt. I've heard comments saying that Freddie Spencer wants to make MotoGP a non-contact sport, which is just so not true. It's so melodramatic. Although Freddie Spencer is the most dangerous thing about bike racing, and it's killing this sport. And then it doubled down when Brad Binder made those comments saying that he couldn't send it on Bagnaia because of Freddie Spencer, which is just not true. Like,
you couldn't send it because you couldn't get into a position to send it without risking yours and Bagnaia's race. And you know what? Sometimes that shit happens. It's motorsport.
Like, this is the 1 year anniversary of Francesco Bagnaia winning this race last year with an illegally low front tire.
When the entire sport had a handshake agreement to cheat and not punish one another for it.
This is a sport that has opened Pandora's box on aerodynamics and has refused to put the genie back in the bottle. This is the sport that has ride height devices that could be deemed as a safety risk and still allows them to be used anyway. This is a sport
knocking Aprilis out of races.
Yeah, like this is the sport that has now so much aero, it has a genuine raceability problem to the point where Michelin, and look, don't get me wrong, they deserve some fair criticism for how their tires have been constructed, but they can't build a tire that can handle the amount of pressure that these bikes are now generating on said front tires. The sport has a fundamental raceability problem, but now you're telling me Freddie Spencer's the real problem. No. I'm sorry. It's like people need to put their agendas aside and realize that as much as I don't like Freddie Spencer's stewarding, he is not the biggest problem in this sport right now. And don't get me wrong, it is a problem. But I feel like
we've raked him over the coals many a time on this show.
Right.
This is not one of those days.
And I feel like he's now becoming the scapegoat for a lot of the sports issues. And I don't like the way this is going narrative-wise. We spent too much time and too much frustration at so many of the issues that MotoGP has gone through in the last couple of years to get to this point that now Freddie Spencer is the problem. Now, I'll say his name. Simon Patterson tweeted me when I mentioned this theory about Freddie Spencer and how I think he boxed himself into a corner regarding Jerez. And the tweet's out there. It's public, so I don't mind talking about it. And I honestly couldn't be asked to reply. I was just like, you know what? This is not
to that effect, right?
Like, this is not worth the pissing contest. But Patterson said to me that generally lap one incident shouldn't go punished.
Hang on to that for just a sec, Dre. This is the guy who on the Races podcast basically screamed for 10-15 minutes about how he doesn't care what the precedent is. He wants Marc Marquez banned for the race one incident. Which lap 1 to lap 2, massive difference. Where Marc broke too late and crashed into 2 other riders. He got very deserved pair of long lap penalties.
And did he? Because we don't.
Or
know
did he?
Exactly.
Because they don't know how to. Because again, we're not defending MotoGP stewarding at large here. There is definitely a problem here. We're not saying that there isn't. But you can't then turn around and then say, oh, well, early race incidents and lap one incidents, there's a degree of mitigation with that because, well, the entire sport called for Taka Nakagami's head last year when he himself headbutted the back of a Ducati.
And broke Alex Rin's wrist in the process.
Yes. And no one cared that it was lap one, turn one, because it caused a gigantic pileup.
That was the same race that Alex Rins apparently used the word cunt under his breath and basically said Freddie Spencer was not fit for his job as lead steward.
So you are asking for the line to be in different places depending on which rider is going to fall foul of that line and how hard the racing you want to see is. And that is just not how this can work.
Right. This is what I'm getting at here. I don't think any major party involved knows what a penalty is anymore. And I'm being generous when I say I'm feigning ignorance to a degree on this, right? I think there's a lot of agendas out there. I absolutely think a lot of people don't like Marc Marquez's riding style to the point where he's now, again, an easy scapegoat for his incident at Portimao was the biggest gotcha a lot of the people that hated him have been waiting for. Another aggressive incident where they can go, ha, got him. Like, hit him with a race ban. And there is so many double standards I've pointed out regarding how these races are officiated, not from Dorna's side, not from the FIM side, but from us as fans. On the one hand, you say lap one move shouldn't be punished, but in the same breath, we're saying that, Nakagami should have been given a severe penalty for what happened in Catalunya. What about Jorge Lorenzo when he tucked the front of Catalunya in 2019 when he was at Repsol Honda and then
he
took
went
out
full
3
bowling
title
ball.
rivals? Yeah.
Yeah, he got raked over the coals by everyone involved, and he did get a penalty for that, didn't he?
No.
Oh, yeah, he didn't.
Right.
So, you pick and choose when lap one moves should and shouldn't be punished, and you pick and choose what needs to be hit harder and what needs to be let go as a racing incident. The riders don't know where the line is. The stewards don't know where the line is, and we don't know where the line is either.
We all sit here confused as fuck. And that's what the confusion is what leads to the anger. It's what leads to the agenda making. And it's what leads to us sitting here, twiddling our thumbs, getting into dick measuring contests on social media. Because the reality is, no one knows what a yard is anymore. No one knows what a penalty is anymore. And then that just brings up all the anger, all the frustration. And as a result, we all take it out on Freddie Spencer because he's the easy target in all of this. And
there's valid criticism for Freddie Spencer there's valid criticism to be had towards him.
Absolutely.
In this scenario, because ultimately those decisions have kind of brought us to this point. But it's not validating the death threats that you're sending the dude.
It's not validating any of the nasty stuff that we're seeing. He's not the only problem with this sport from a sporting standpoint. This sport's got many, many problems. We've talked about it at great length on previous MotoGP episodes.
We still don't know when Marc Marquez comes back, if he's going to serve a double long lap penalty. We still don't know. It's been over a calendar month now.
Right. We're blaming Spencer for that one too? I know we kind of have to because
in this case, yes, but that's valid to blame him over.
Right. We've gotten to a point where we are now trying to dump every one of the sport's problems on him, and it is not as simple as that. It just isn't. No. And I refuse to sit here and make him... I believe that I am better than this, and I'm not going to start making out that the guy is a scapegoat for all of the sports issues. Yes, he probably got her ref a bit wrong this weekend, but I don't think this was the massively egregious weekend that a lot of people think it is, because the reality is a lot of these people wanted tougher stewarding in the top flight and now don't like it that they've gotten said tougher stewarding. Be careful what you fucking wish for, because we're going to end up with more weekends like this. No one knows what they want from their bike racing anymore.
Nobody knows what they want for their racing in general, man.
Yeah. This is not an exclusively bike racing problem, but you give people what they want and then they spit it back at you, and then you say, well, You wanted more cheese and more macaroni, and now you don't want macaroni or cheese. If you
I'll take the
understand that
macaroni and
reference,
cheese.
if you understand that reference, you get 10 points.
I'm culturally ignorant, Cam. You know this.
Courage the Cowardly Dog. Go watch it. It's great.
I have watched that, but it was never one of my favorite late 90s, early 2000s cartoons. I'll be real with you. You know, this will be talked about. Hopefully not for a while, but I can't imagine it's going to, ever leave. No. Also on Thursday, we had a very strange, weird champ announcement. The FIM announced that they will be creating a Women's World Motorcycle Racing Championship. It'll be added to the World Superbike Support Bill as, quote, a final destination championship. Pause for blank stares, bits of derisive laughter, snarling. It'll likely be on 600cc super sport bikes. It could be up and running as soon as 2024. Go back and listen to our previous podcast for our thoughts on F1 Academy and how that was handled, or rather how that was not handled. But I mean, that may tip where we're heading with this. Dre, do we think this is the way to increase female participation in motorcycle racing?
It's a start. This is better than zero. And that's not necessarily a compliment. This has been something that a lot of people, and I'll give him his credit as well as being critical of him to a degree. When I talked to him about it a few minutes ago, Simon Patterson's been one of these people that have been gunning for this for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And I agree with him that you need to do something, because I've said before that the sport is 5 years behind Formula One when it comes to diversity. And Formula One hasn't exactly done a sterling job of that in recent times. So, yeah, it's not ideal. And a lot of the information I just mentioned, that RJ just mentioned, came from Grigori Volovia, the organizer of the World Superbikes series. It's a start, certainly. I think the platform is ultimately a good thing, but I will echo what I said in our F1 Academy special where we talked a little bit about that during Baku's podcast. I'm not sure this is the right way to do it. I'm not sure this is the right area for it. I don't think a final destination world championship for women is the best path when you're in a 99% male-dominated sport.
You know what that reads to some people? That means we have found a way to sequester all these other women away from the shit that we actually care about. That's what that reads to some people.
You end up in a situation where all the female riders are segregated off into their own championship. And to kind of echo a point that we made, it's kind of topical that this week we're getting to talk about this in two completely separate sports. It feels like they're running before they can walk, or indeed like crawl or breathe.
Yeah.
Because the endpoint, you've got an endpoint championship without any of the infrastructure to support it. You've made a Formula One with no feeder series to feed it.
Yeah.
Where are all the riders going to come from?
Yeah. Jorge Vegas made the point that during the press conference that there's going to be a road to get into this series set up in the future, which, okay, good. But I do wonder, what's the participation going to be like towards a talent cup, for example, at that level? Like, it works in areas like Asia and Britain, because Britain's had a talent cup in the past. It works there because you know the participation is healthy and there'll always be more talent coming through the pipeline from a junior series level to climb the ranks. There's no proof of concept for women in this regard yet. Like, unfortunately, there's very, very few names you can point out that are on the two main series support bills right now. I mean, we're talking the same names we've always mentioned. Ana Carrasco, the 2018 World Supersport 300 champion. Maria Herrera, who's currently in Moto E. You know, Jenny Timmer, for example, who I know was on the BSB top flight for a little while as well. The point I'm getting at here is that motorsport is one of the wonderful few sports out there where physical limitations do not stop you from being able to compete at the very highest level.
We just talked at length about Dani Pedrosa, a 5'2" man who everyone but me right now, because I just had surgery a month ago, would be able to pick up.
Right.
And he is an extraordinarily talented individual who is the greatest rider to never win a championship, and it ain't close.
31 Grand Prix wins at the highest level. 31.
Against the best.
Against the very best this sport's ever had. Probably the two best riders of all time, and another guy who's in the top 5. Jorge Lorenzo. I'll probably chuck in that as well. Like, the point I'm getting at here is that it feels like I don't like the idea of an endgame. And when I wrote about this, I used 2 recent examples in other sports where, again, physical limitations are not a hindrance towards women being able to compete at the highest level against men. I used Fallon Sherrock in the world of darts, who exploded onto the scene when she made it to the 3rd round of the actual world championship a couple of years ago.
The co-ed world championship, the one at the Alexandra Palazzandra. God, that was so hype. She beat Ted Evans in one match, and we thought, that's amazing. And then she went on beat Menser Silovic, who was a top 16 ranked player at the time.
Right. And that was a lightning in a bottle. Billie Jean King commented on that on social media. The Billie Jean King talking about darts.
Oh yeah, that's some good shit. That's that good shit.
Right, and then
anyway, sorry to interrupt our darts 101 here.
No, but you're absolutely right. And I used Rhiannon Evans, who again has won the women's world championship in snooker. I want to say 13 times. And she's now continually trying to crack to get a tour card to compete with the men at the very highest level. And it's almost a bit sad in a sense that her most high-profile moment while doing that was having to compete against her own ex-husband, Mark Allen, who just made a world championship semi-final. And that was awkward as hell. And it was awkward as hell because that was a more high-profile moment for snooker than it probably should have been. But I digress. They understand that, yes, it's nice to win a world championship against other women, but we all know the true end game is being able to compete against men. Because it's been a male-dominated sport for as long as we remember, and beating the few other women that take part within your sport is not the true end game. So calling
the
this
end game here should be competing in MotoGP.
Yeah. We all know that's the true end game.
Yeah,
not
competing in
segregated...
MotoGP, competing in World Superbike.
Yeah, like...
That should be the end game.
Yeah, the end game should not be competing in a segregated world championship on World Superbike support bill. It just isn't. And, I'm not going to pretend like it should be. We should expect better.
We should expect better. I mean, and to that effect as well, I mean... We don't even really talk about World Superbike much on this podcast anymore due to the continued savage beatings of the field by Alvaro Bautista. And soon to be the face of BMW, Top Rack.
Razgadioglu.
God, why are you doing this to yourself, Raz? Why?
Oh, Keaton, here it goes.
Again. But I digress. Does anyone here really give a shit about World Supersport 600? I mean, I do because I'm weird.
There will be people. Look,
on a grand scale,
sickos will watch anything. Sickos will get invested.
I know. Anything. I'm aware. I am one of those sickos. But it's just the end game should be it being a springboard up into World Superbike or MotoGP. Yeah. Or any regional top flight superbike series, not just being on the support card on a class that is very niche.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just again, I just don't like this attitude of sticking a fork in the middle of the ladder and having done with it. And I think they've gone backwards. I think you should have the support groups coming up through the ladder system first and working on that before you declare a world championship. And look, this is going to need all the exposure it's going to get. Sticking it on World Superbike support bill is not the way to do it.
No.
It just isn't. It needs the full-blooded Dorna package on this one.
I mean, World Superbike is genuinely unwatchable in the United States.
Right.
I need to purchase it. I need to purchase another video pass that I didn't intend to purchase. Thank you, Dorna. And I just, the solution is at the grassroots level, all the way on up. We're talking about mini bikes. We're talking about putting these people on mini bikes when they're barely old enough to walk, because that's what it takes these days. That's what it takes to get to the highest level in MotoGP. And as you said, Dre, the solution for me is not, all right, let's bring the darts analogy back in. You're going to close your eyes. You're going to throw the dart, whatever series, whatever intermediate class it lands on, that's what we're going with. That's not a solution.
Yeah, I feel like we still have work to do in that regard. And like, don't get me wrong, it's nice that it exists. It's nice to get a public declaration that the sport is trying to do something.
The bar?
Yeah,
the bar is it exists.
The bar is it exists from another entity who, again, do you really trust the FIM to be doing this entirely with altruistic views in mind? It'd be nice if they were.
No. I have to be very blunt about it. No, I don't.
They're an even bigger nepotism factory than the FIA.
And boy, we've talked about it.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And yeah, I have every reason to be cynical about it. But we can only hope they build on this and they put the path in place all the way down to grassroots and mini-motos level. And hopefully it can inspire the next generation. Because if you think in four wheels the game is bleak, it's even bleaker on two. And Anna Carrasco is an unfortunate extreme outlier of the state of women's bike racing, unfortunately, and much more needs to be done. That's how I look at it anyway. MotoGP is back in 2 weeks' time at Le Mans, and that should be an interesting one.
Wait a minute, my trip to Le Mans is not. It's motorcycle Le Mans. It's Le Mans Bugatti.
Yeah.
It's Le Mans Bugatti, but the other one, because we also just had the 24 hours of Le Mans for bikes.
Indeed. Marc Marquez likely back at Le Mans, and Enea Bastianini likely back at Le Mans. Couldn't make it through her F's weekend, unfortunately. Too much pain in the shoulder blades. Still had to pull out on Saturday.
Have to see.
But we'll have to see. Hopefully he'll be back for...
See about Miggy. We don't know what the prognosis is for Miggy right now.
Yeah, get well soon, Miggy. He's had just a wretched run of luck since joining Aprilia. The man is still very quick. It's just he's been T-boned twice already this season. Jesus, poor guy. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, best wishes to Miggy on that one. Maybe we'll get Marc Marquez back and maybe Enea Bastianini at Le Mans. We'll have to see. It's the last MotoGP race before they take a 4-week spring break of their own. It's very weird, this goddamn calendar.
Kazakhstan. It's been struck from the calendar.
Yeah, we didn't mention that. Kazakhstan's gone.
You're all shocked. You're all so shocked that this barely finished course in an unproven market.
This is a very big failure.
Right. And nothing of value was lost.
I can't wait to tell my wife.
Motorsport101.com.
Low-hanging fruit.
The lowest of low-hanging fruit. Dre_WTF1 at RJ O'Connell at CBuckley917. Motorsport101.com, our website. Motorsport_101 is our Twitter. Do check us out on all of those platforms if you haven't already. Much love to all you guys for watching as ever. We'll be back for IndyCar at Barber. But until then, thanks for watching. Watching? Damn. Oh, that's a blooper.
We're a visual medium again.
We're a visual medium
Thanks for
again. Who
listening.
knew? But from me, Dre Harrison, RJ O'Connell, and Cam Buckley, thank you very much for listening. And I'll catch you guys next time. Sayonara.
Thanks for reading, y'all.